And we know that there's going to be plenty of follow-up questions, and we're fine with that. We just wanted to sort of get an idea of what some of the common questions were that everybody shared. And we did get a number of emails from folks, and there was a lot of questions about some of the same topics. So our goal today is to try to cover those topics and answer people's questions all at once. And then if we need to follow up with you individually to have deeper conversations on more specific things, we will do exactly that. And we can do that over email, we can do it over phone, or if you want to meet in person, I'm happy to do that as well as we draft each garden agreement with the different groups.
And I just want to say thank you, everyone, for sending that sent comments and questions. This is really helping us kind of. So there are certain things that we're stuck with, but then there's a lot of room on other things. So we're going to talk about different ways that we can approach a lot of the questions and issues and concerns that people have. And I think we'll be able to find a solution with for most, if not all things. And again, I want to apologize. I know a lot of people mentioned timing. We're going to address timing and give more flexibility on that. Our hope was to have this ready a while ago. It's just, as DC government get legal approval and senior approval for documents. We recognize this isn't the best time, but this is the time that it was given to us when it was approved. So we'll talk more about timing as we go through the document, but we have a lot of flexibility. So.
And I think that you all should be able to type questions and comments into the chat box. And for the sake of not everybody talking over each other, we would prefer that if you have a question or a comment to type it into the chat box so that we can address them in an orderly way, and also so that everyone can hear what the question and the response is without us piling up on top of each other. So with that, I think we should move to the first document that we're going to review, which is the Code of Conduct. Josh is going to bring it up on the screen here. And you should be able to hear us can you all see the document?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah,
and you can still hear us. Perfect. So we did not get many questions, or I don't think we got any questions on the Code of Conduct. So is there anything about this that you all wanted to address? I mean, these are basically the rules that we're asking gardeners, all gardeners, to abide by with the idea of respecting each other and the space.
I have a question.
Okay. Who is this? I'm sorry.
This is Phil Bonner and Maureen Spagnolo. We are the presidents of the Newark Street Community Garden.
Great.
And as you probably know, we have a big garden of 240 plots. And I see that one of the things here is 1 plot per household. And that is okay, but our garden started in 1975, and tradition has given people 1 plot per person. So we do have several couples which have 2 plots, often adjacent. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to bring that up. I don't know if other gardens have that same issue. Maureen and I have just got into this 2 or 3 years ago, so we're sort of like inherited all this stuff.
Right.
And so we need time to do this. We can't just do it.
Also, we have one gardener who's very upset. He and his wife had their plot separately before they got married. And they both have a very different style of gardening. They're both very married to their plots because they find it their way of solace. And they're extremely unhappy about having to give up one of their plots because they said, why should we be penalized for getting married?
That is a very interesting and unique scenario. So part of the what we have to contend with here is that we're the government, right? So we have to treat everybody the same way. That's our mandate. And when there are waiting lists for plots, the people sitting on the waiting lists don't feel like that's fair, and that's not unique to Newark Street. This has come up over the years at various gardens where one household has had, or one individual gardener or one individual household has had multiple plots, and we really feel that the only way to fairly address this is to say that, there's one plot per household. Now, I think Josh talked a little bit about timing earlier.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely recognize the bad timing with this, and a lot of people have already started, working on their plot. So we definitely, I think we can be flexible on this, and we could postpone this rule till 2020. But
Okay.
unfortunately, this is something that is over our heads. I mean, it's come up with multiple issues and multiple gardens that have reached our senior staff, and this is
Yeah.
down.
Well, there's one other question regarding this. One of our members brought up the question of household. How do you define a household? You could have, say, you've got several different families living in the same household who are not related to each other. For example, if you have a rooming house or something like that.
Right.
Well, so what we don't want to get in the business of defining the household and what it considers family. So we're saying it's that one address. An address is a household, and we also, like you said, if there is that situation where there is a justifiable circumstance. We're going to talk about this later, but there's a section that we put in the garden agreement that's going to give us some flexibility on things that, as long as they don't violate any clear laws or DPR standards, we can make, exceptions if we have, justification. So if there is a chance where there are multiple individual families at one address, we can work with you on that. But the general rule is going to be one address is one household.
Right, because more often than not, what we find is that it is an individual or a household that has had more than one plot for many years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And going back to the idea that there's a waiting list of neighbors waiting to use that public land,
Right.
you have to be able to address that fairly.
Well, yes, we've been pushing that for the last couple of years, but since there wasn't a clear rule from the DC government, our rules say one per person. So
Fine.
we were just going by that. But the other thing I do have, which thank you very much for being willing to flexible to delay this till the 2020 season, because we also do have a variety of sizes, so some gardeners can be put in bigger plots and others in smaller plots.
Right. And, one of the things that's complicated with the community gardens across the board is that every single one of them is different, right? They're different sizes. They've been around for different durations of time. And so we're constantly trying to walk this line of having set rules that everyone has to follow for the purposes of fairness, but then also understanding that because every garden is literally different from the one, from each other, that we have to have some flexibility because, having hard lines on stuff just doesn't necessarily always make the most sense and might not be the most fair thing. So we get that, which is why we are open to having conversations with individual gardens about these very specific and unique situations. But hoping that you all will understand that we are also being held to a standard where we do have to treat people across the board generally the same.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So if there are no other specific questions about the code of conduct, we can move on to the guidance document, and we'd like to explain a little bit about this to give you all a better understanding of what the purpose of now this is the guidance on establishing a partner group and drafting operating procedures. Oh yeah, Josh is going to get it on the screen for us.
Is this one of these?
I have it on the computer.
A guidance.
Hi, sorry, Josh and Kate, this is Stacy from Friendship Gardens. You have a number of questions in the chat box.
Oh, we do? Okay. Thank you. Let's pull up that.
No, I'm wondering if our view is different. Hold on. Thank you for pointing that out to us.
So maybe
Hold on, going back to a different view. Hold on.
Okay, here we go. Oh, sorry. So when we share, we don't see the chat box. Sorry. This is a new program for us, but all right. So going down to the chat box. First one: how do we determine if a gardener has more than one garden?
Well, that should be, the garden manager or the board should have a list of who is assigned to which plots.
No, I'm sorry, this is Stacy. That was my question. I'm meaning, a garden in another community garden, a plot in another community garden.
I mean, that one, I mean, it's something that we put in the rule, but we don't have,
That in the chat.
can't really expect people to enforce that or follow up on and do the research on that. That's more of a, a lot of this is the honor system and just about creating a culture that this is what's expected.
Because we know, I mean, we have come across, people put their names on multiple waiting lists for multiple gardens. So. Sure.
And, part of what the agreement says is the DPR has the right to request your, what am I trying to say here? Your list of gardeners. And if there is cause for concern, we can definitely get all of those. But I mean, again, we're trying not to make work for you all. So we don't want to have to demand that from all the community gardens because we trust that you're more or less following your waiting list in the appropriate way, and that your roster is the word I was looking for, and that your roster is okay. But if there is a cause for concern, we can certainly request the rosters from all the gardens, and then we will have to compare and contrast them, which obviously would take some time. So, that's definitely one of those situations where if you have a specific concern about a gardener, we can help you address it. We don't expect you to figure that out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next one, I see the manager needs to keep copies on file. How long do these need to be kept? Should forms from 1 year be given to a new manager if there's a transition?
I think the expectation is that gardeners will sign the conduct and the waiver each year. So once the new season starts, you can put the old waivers and conduct forms in the recycle bin.
I mean, if you have someone that's gardening for a long time, do you think we can just have them keep
the same waivers?
They could just sign one waiver and keep that.
Probably that might be more trouble than it's worth for the manager. When I was a gardener at Twin Oaks, we actually used everybody signing the documents as a way to make sure people showed up for our first annual meeting. And it was actually kind of an effective tool. So, again, I think we can leave that up to you all, but you don't need to retain them for 5 years or anything like that. I think is the bigger question. We need to be able to reference them in the year that is happening.
I put in a comment about the 1 mile rule.
Let's see here.
Oh, yes. So to address the 1 mile rule, thank you for that. So the guidance document that we're about to enter, I don't think we did a good job explaining that right away. That is more of a guidance, and that was in that rule. We also didn't do a very good job, explaining that is an optional rule. That is not something that it says, community managers may if they want. So a lot of our gardens do that because they can retain. Normally, on average, people that are more local tend to be more invested in the gardens, tend to, help out more with maintenance. Which if you have to travel across the city, it's just logistically hard. So we wrote that as a rule, as an option. That is not something that you have to do. It's something that we recommend just to kind of build. If you're having trouble getting people to show up on maintenance days and taking care of their plots, but the whole entire guidance document, actually, these are just suggestions. And then, we can, the idea is the actual agreement, we'll go over the actual agreement. We want the garden rules from you. There's a section called, on the actual agreement, it's called garden procedure rules, which we'll go over in a second. And that's where you guys, if you don't want to write your rules out, you can use these rules as a guidance, or you can write your own rules and submit that. And that's where the flexibility comes, where we can actually work with you. So if there's things that you need to do differently, that we, as long as there's justifications to it, we can work with you.
Right. So so in the actual agreement, the cooperative agreement that we're going to be asking garden managers to sign, there is a section it's number 14 in section 3 called garden operating procedures. And what we're asking is that each garden group develop a set of operating procedures that you all abide by. It's your organizational structure. And so we're asking you to draft this document for us so that we can attach it to this agreement. We know that that's a lot of work, so Josh actually put this guidance on establishing partner group operating procedures together. So the guidance document was meant to be a tool for you all so that you don't have to start from scratch. These are recommendations. You are certainly not obligated to write them exactly the way we have them here. We were just trying to do some of the heavy lifting for you. Oh, do you want to pull this? Yeah, let's actually, so we're going to pull up do we go through all the questions? No, maybe not. Hold on. Give us a sec here.
So the next question, I know paper copies seem to be the way to go for the 2 waivers. However, any online option would be helpful. Yeah.
I don't know if we have a tool that allows us to produce documents that have electronic signatures, but we can certainly look into that. We can ask our IT folks. Yeah, I mean, paper's a pain and wasteful, and we totally get that. So we will ask about that.
If anyone has any suggestions on how to do electronic signatures, definitely email us. I think Penny Friendship Gardens, oh, there's one, but there isn't any way to monitor the no smoking and no pets rules. So a lot of this is like no pets. It's definitely when a Department of Health issue, like a rule. It's a sanitation violation to have like pets around things that you're going to eat, especially when they're using the bathroom. And we understand that some of these gardens, I mean, it's easy when you have fence and you could just say, no, don't bring your dogs in. But when a lot of our gardens don't have fences, we understand. I mean, it's like it's a within reason. Like, we don't expect you to enforce this and make sure there's no dogs that are coming in, but we do expect that this is kind of the expectation, which goes along with DOH's requirements that that you let everyone know. So expectation that not to bring dogs in. But a lot of this stuff, like I said, it's just expectations, and we can't expect volunteer managers to be a 24-hour policing. We hope that we just kind of help everyone understand the culture of this and expectations rather than being the enforcement of this.
Yeah, and actually it is DC law that no one is allowed to smoke cigarettes or anything else for that matter in any DPR park, whether it's a community garden or a playground or outside the rec center. That is the law that was passed about 2 years ago, I think. And it's the same thing as the no dogs off leash law, right? Like, that's been a law that's been in place for decades. Enforcement is always an issue for us with these laws. They're on the books so that if somebody's a repeat offender, there's a recourse. But you're right, enforcing it is almost impossible to do, and that's true not just for community gardens, but for all of our sites. Technically speaking, MPD is the responsible body. They're the only ones that have enforcement capacity. Is a cop going to show up to your park because someone's smoking a cigarette in it? Probably not. So again, as Josh said, this is really just so that you all know what the rules and regulations are. So if somebody's offending, you can say, hey, you're not allowed to do that here.
All right, moving on. Someone was saying about we collect $15 fees from members, and we're not incorporated. So to explain that, there was actually a lot of questions about the incorporation. So this is just one idea. So you have 2 options with gardens. I mean, a lot of our gardens, they don't collect plot fees, and when they need something, they'll collect money, for each individual thing. But like, they'll collect money to, get some soil. They'll collect money to, buy a tool shed.
People chip in.
Yeah,
put it that way.
But most of the time, it's just like you pay for what you're growing, and that's one way to do it. And another way is to actually collect plot dues, and use those plot dues as a budget for the garden. The biggest concern with this is, and that in the issues that we handled is when people come to us and they're concerned about the mismanagement of the money, we have no way to really, we have no way to prove where the money's going, and also it's very hard to defend the managers too at the same time. So we so this is just one option. The idea behind this is that you don't put this money into your personal bank account, but you actually put it into a bank account under the garden's name, which you need to incorporate to do this, and then you can actually show people where the money is. But we're also open. The main concern of this is that when someone has issues and concerns about mismanagement, we're able to show them right away where all the money is going. So if you have a different way, like if you don't want to do the incorporation, which I can understand, I've incorporated a couple gardens. It's a little bit of a pain, at least to get it started. But if you don't want to do this way and you have another way that can 100% show where all the money is, and whenever there's an issue, we're open to that too. The main thing is we just need to be able to show any accountability of where the money's going.
Also, another option too that I think is reasonable is that if there's a nonprofit organization in your neighborhood or your community that would be willing to serve as a fiscal sponsor, that's an easy thing to do. It's not like we know the gardens aren't raking in $50,000 a year, right? I mean, most of you are collecting somewhere between $400 and $1,000 a year, I'm guessing. So we're not talking about mega bucks here, and we know that, and we get that it feels silly. But a fiscal sponsorship is an option. I'm happy to suggest a couple of organizations to folks if that's a route you'd like to explore. But right, this is about accountability, and this is one of those situations where the government has to be able to say we have a way to keep track of this, and that's mostly what that's about.
Like I said, if you have ideas how to do it, please send the ideas to us, and we can definitely work with you on that.
Okay.
Next one. Not sure what the lag is. Are people experiencing lags right now?
No.
Okay. Well, this is recorded, and if you're having trouble hearing or any kind of lag, just let us know, and we will definitely follow up with you.
Yeah, and we'll be sending the link out to everybody anyway. So I'm sure you're dying to relive this moment over and over again. So.
You have some folks who have they can't use the chat box.
Oh, that's a good point. Okay, so maybe we can unmute. Oh, I see. I think the call-in folks are muted. Sorry, call-in folks. Again, bear with us as we explore the use of this new tool.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
So now you can actually unmute yourself. Just go to where your name is at, hover over the mouse, and unmute yourself.
Oh, cool.
Okay, great.
All right.
Yeah, I use this system every day for work. So.
Oh, God, I wish I'd have known that we'd have brought you in to train us.
I may need to buy you a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to catch up.
We're just really new to it. Okay, so please follow up with us if you're having issues. And we will definitely, like I said, this is just to get everyone kind of started, and then from there we're happy to, we will follow up with everyone and make sure everyone's okay with everything.
I don't know if you can hear me if I just unmuted myself. I have a fellow board member who has called in who can't use the computer application.
Okay.
So he's using the phone number you provided, but he can't unmute himself.
Okay.
He's just in on the phone. So I don't know if there's a solution for that.
Yes.
John Manley.
What's his phone number?
Okay.
I should know that, and I don't know if I do.
I see a 415, a 652, a 210, and a 398.
Of course, I only emailed John, so I don't know. Josh, you probably have him in your contacts.
On mute, and it doesn't. Wait, oh, maybe it is working. Wait, it's weird.
I think he's at 202.
Okay.
Okay, everyone.
415-3826.
Okay, so you can just unmute that one.
Is that you, John?
Did you unmute it?
Yeah.
Yes. Woo!
Okay.
Oh, beautiful. Evidently, because I use a Mac computer and an Android phone, it won't track onto your chat system.
Oh, goodness.
At least that's the message I'm getting. So, yes, I have quite a few questions, follow-ups, issues. But the one that I wanted to make was if you want an equitable system, because the plots differ significantly in size, that if a garden can set a square foot rule as opposed to a plot rule,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that would be equitable.
Yeah, think that's definitely worth looking at, and I think that's one of the ways that we could be flexible in how your operating procedures are drafted.
We could definitely work with you. I know like Virginia Ave has all different crazy, different size plots. So we'll definitely be able to work with you on that one.
Okay, that was sort of the big one that I wanted to start off with. But go ahead and continue. It's nice to be able to.
I got you in.
I think that's.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. There was the Fort Greble was asking about garden improvements. Let's we'll follow you up on that one.
Okay, can I ask another one?
Sure.
While we're talking about the fees and dues, some of the gardens, by a democratic election, have elected to have the gardens do bulk purchasing for them, so to speak, so that the gardens provide the tools, the gardens provide the supplements, and so forth.
Yep.
But a garden can't do that unless it can take in enough money to cover those.
Right.
Absolutely.
So the dues, I mean, again, this is that same situation, the idea is if you're collecting dues, there's got to be some kind of official structure in place to receive that money. It cannot be cash in hand that somebody stores under their bed in a box. It cannot go into a personal bank account.
John's point more is on the cap, the $30.
Well, there are 2 points. There are 2 points. One of them is that in some of your documentation, you say a treasurer is, how shall I say it, optional. Whereas a properly run garden has got to have a treasurer to maintain in a proper bank account. And those should be established. Those should be requirements, I think.
Well, part of the problem is that in many of the gardens, there's very few people who are willing to step up into leadership positions. So we've got a bunch of gardens where there's only 1 or 2 people who are willing to step up into the leadership position. So if we require a president, a vice president, a treasurer, and a secretary, we're automatically going to...
Majority of our gardens probably don't collect dues.
Yeah, so
I would say more of the older gardens are the ones that have been collecting plat dues, but most of our newer ones aren't plat due gardens. So, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I mean, if you are a plat doer, I mean, you collecting plat dues, I would definitely recommend having a treasurer, just someone just focused on all that. But I don't think we can do that as a requirement just for the people that aren't collecting plat dues.
Yeah, which makes it difficult for gardens of different sizes, compositions, willingness to work and so forth. But when you talk about accountability, in the older, more established gardens where they have these offices and they have a treasurer who gives a regular report out to everybody, then you have accountability.
Right. I mean, If we could get 4 people to step up into leadership positions in every garden in the city, we would be thrilled.
Okay. Let me skip to the other one, and that is the amount of money. Because if you put a cap on how much we're able to collect, then we have to diminish the.
Well, I'd say this. That is for the amount that you're allowed to. I'm going to use the word charge, even though that's not really accurate. Charge for the plot itself. So let's say you can't charge more than $30 for a plot. If you want to ask people to chip in for additional resources, that's okay. What we're trying to avoid is locking people out of the community gardens because they can't afford their annual membership dues.
Well, so what about for those gardens where we have multiple sizes?
What's that?
So again, sorry to be Virginia to be raising our issues here, but we've got a lot of different sizes ranging from 30 square feet to 100 square feet. So yes, maybe if you couldn't afford the larger plot, would you, when, if we get to your spot on the wait list, start of the spring, hey, here are the next 5 plots people have left. Would you choose a smaller one? I just don't know how we'd police. Okay, well, no, you can't get compost from that pile, if we brought in compost, or you can't have any of those wood chips, or you can't touch any of the tools in the shed if you didn't participate in some other charge or fee.
You guys might be a good candidate to try out the square footage.
Yeah,
why don't you guys come up, create a system based on square footage and send that to us.
And we do.
Okay, well, send that to us, and then we'll see. I mean, we should be able to include that in our flexibility.
So, Josh, this is Tanisha Christian. I actually have the complete opposite problem. I don't have anyone to garden with. So if any of the garden managers, if they have like a wait list that, they can send over, I would love to reach out to some folks on their waiting list just to see if they'll be interested in a plot over here.
That's a great, Tanisha, where's your garden? What garden are you at?
At Fort Greble, we have a lot of work that needs to get done at that garden. So I need as much hands-on as I can. Well, I'm not a stickler for dues and fees. I just need people there.
Just need bodies.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we could definitely send a follow-up email.
Thank you.
With some information and see if anyone on waiting list wants to join you. Okay, well, why don't we, so I have a list of more questions people emailed me. I just want to make sure we get through all the questions. Someone said, where's Fort Greble? So Fort Greble is Ward 8. It's kind of along the, it's close to the 295 kind of area.
It's pretty much in front of the Air Force Base.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Yeah.
We'll send more information to that one. So a couple other questions. People have sent. We talked about timing. If you just join, some of the things like only one plot per household. We're going to get that till next year to accomplish that. So people who already started gardening or planting don't have to worry about that. We talked about incorporation, the 1 mile, it's just suggestive. As people were talking about the organic, they wanted some exceptions to use pesticides mainly to invasive weeds and to use Roundup on poison ivy. And we basically said, I mean, if you need to have a exception, just call us or email us, and we'll be able to work with you. But the general rule of thumb is we want to try to keep these as organic as possible. But just contact us if there's a specific case that you need, like there's an insane patch of poison ivy. We could definitely work with you on that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it becomes a slippery slope, right? So if somebody in the garden sees you using Roundup and they don't know what they're doing, they just think, oh, well, I could use Roundup now too. It's not good for any of us to have that stuff in our soil and our food. So we understand that there are certain applications where it makes sense, and we're happy to work with you on that. And if it's a big project that requires a lot of invasive removal or if you're worried about poison ivy contamination because there's so much of it, we can also think about ways where we can maybe get some volunteers in there to help and make an impact that will be longer lasting even than temporarily killing stuff with Roundup, because a lot of times it won't actually take it down to the root anyway. So
someone talked about the meetings. We are requiring one public meeting, and we do want you to at least just put up a flyer or contact the local listserv. We're trying to, a big push right now is trying to include, find ways to be more inclusive with the surrounding community. So we are asking for that.
It's one of the complaints we get from non-gardeners or from people in the communities that are around community gardens, is that they feel like, and not in all cases, this is just something we've heard over the years, is that the gardens are exclusive and they don't have a process for people that are not members of the garden to interact or to voice their concerns or their opinions. And it is public land, so we always are going to go back to that. We know that gardeners are individually invested in their plots and in their community gardens, but at the end of the day, this is property that belongs to every single resident. And that's always going to, we have to make room for people to participate.
The next one that we got a lot of questions about this one. If you're doing youth programs, do you need documents and do you need stuff, President, and let Kate, yeah.
So we are subject to the laws that are around the Child Protection Act, and I will. I tried to find the link to the DC code, and I wasn't successful. I'm gonna have to reach out to our volunteer manager for it, and we will send everybody that language and the link to the language if you're interested in reading it. Basically, what it says is that anybody that is doing regular programming, like scheduled programming with any what we call vulnerable populations. So that's children, that's seniors, and that's disabled folks or alter-abled folks. Those are considered vulnerable populations, and the law requires the DPR background checks volunteers that work with those populations, and that also that volunteer is managed by a DPR staff person. I understand that is cumbersome, and it's a real damper on things, but it is the law, and it is not a lot of ways for us to work around it. Does that mean kids can't come to your garden on garden work days and help out? No. It means that you can't host a youth gardening workshop every Saturday morning from 9 till 11, because that would be considered like a regularly scheduled program. It doesn't mean kids can't be involved in your garden. It just, it's just the way that the law is written. So again, this is a situation where if your garden has a specific goal or activities that you're concerned about, we are happy to talk to you about those individual programs and ideas, because they're going to be different at every garden. So we'll certainly try to find a way to work with you on it, but the law is the law.
We'll send you the law out, and if you want to look at the law and try to work with us to try to find ways to work with it within the law, we can definitely help you on that.
Absolutely.
I know that was a big one. Does anyone have any further questions on this one? Okay, moving on. The last couple of questions people had, improvements to the areas. So if you are building new structures to the area, like permanent improvements, new garden beds, expanding walls, things like that, we do need DPR approval for that. I know, depending on the time period with DPR, sometimes it's lax about that, sometimes it's not, but that is something that we're asking for. A lot of times we can give you that approval just over a simple email. I mean, if you're actually building a foundation or something like that, we'll probably need a lot more. We'll need some permits and things like that. But if it's just like you're adding a couple garden beds, I'm just going to double check that we own that property where you're adding, and that it's not going to be in conflict with any kind of programming or anything like that. It's not we will definitely, most of the time we can prove this over the email. And then, like I said, if it's a bigger issue like structure that's going to require permits, we can also get to that. We just need to have some kind of approval process.
Right, structures are the big thing. They're just going to require review by our capital projects team, and depending on how permanent it is, it's gonna inform what the next steps are.
And I think the last concern was just the paperwork that is the amount of extra paperwork that's going to require. We could talk about that. There's a couple. Basically, I know. Yeah, at least I apologize if we haven't presented everything in the most intentional way. But some of this paper. So mainly, what we're requiring from you, like I said, one doc, that guidance doc. That's just to kind of help you. With your bylaws for your garden, but mainly what we're requiring is we have an agreement with you. That's and then part of that agreement is going to include your garden operating procedure. So the main idea behind this is even if not just so we know how you're operating, but also if you guys your garden managers need to leave or get sick or something happens, the new garden managers can see exactly the rules. And most gardens already have their own rules. We just want to make sure all gardens have these basic site-specific rules. And that's why I wrote the guidance document. You can use that if you don't have time or you just don't if it's not that big of a deal. You could just use that and just but if not, if you have site-specific issues, you can modify that. that. You can submit your rules that you're using right now, and as long as it doesn't violate anything serious, we'll approve it. And then the reporting requirement. So there is something that says quarterly annual reports.
Yeah, quarterly reports. So all of our park partners, that's like friends groups, adopt a park groups, community garden groups, and dog park groups have to submit quarterly reports. And the way that I do that is I have a Google form. I send out a link about 2 weeks before the end of each quarter, and then I will ask you to answer a few simple questions. It will not be time consuming. It's mostly things like, how many volunteer hours did you all collectively put towards the garden this past quarter, and a couple of other questions like that. I try very hard to make it not a burden on you, but these are when the director or when the city council asks us questions like how many gardeners do you have, how much, basically they ask us to justify our existence, like why does this program exist, who's using it, what good is it doing, and we have to have a way to point to some numbers. Us saying things like gardens are good and people like them just doesn't cut the mustard. So I will work very hard to make it brief and easy for the manager to fill out. It shouldn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes to do each quarter. And it'll also be a good way for you all to track some of your progress, and so that you can tout that as well.
And the last thing that we're asking is what's called a community inclusion plan, and this doesn't have to be too crazy. This is just basically a general. We're asking everyone to just come up with a general idea of how you can be more inclusive with your community. And we know every community is different, and I know a lot of gardens are already doing this. And this is actually, in the long run, it's going to be more helpful. We found this is the best way to reduce vandalism, reduce theft, to be more inclusive as possible with this community, to reduce any kind of misunderstandings. A lot of people don't really understand how these gardens work, and a lot of times they take that and run with it, and then we get a lot of angry people that don't really know what the situation is. So this idea, we want to put this on you, because we don't want to just tell you to do X, Y, and Z. We want you to, who know your communities the best, to come up with a plan on being more inclusive. And like I said, it doesn't have to be crazy or extensive. We just want to see that you guys are thinking about this. So that's really the main thing. Like I said, we want your garden rules, your site-specific garden rules. We want your community inclusion plan, and then we have quarterly annual reports that Katie is promising to make as simple and as quick as possible.
Low bar.
And I believe that's all what we're asking. If anyone sees anything else,
I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
Low income. How do we determine it, and what is it?
That's a good question. So in the past, we would basically have just done the honor system. We haven't really. Well, I know there are, when they want our program, there are ways they have to prove. But with gardens, it's a lot to ask you all to do background checks on people. So we're mainly just we do the honor system. If someone has trouble, it claims that they're having trouble paying the dues, we trust them. If people want exceptions to that, if they want a more vigorous system, and that they please email us. But that's basically all we're asking for. It's just
We got a fire alarm going off. Sorry, folks, this is part of our learning curve. I see that somebody on a Galaxy Tab A has their hand up, and I don't know can you hear us?
I think so. It's Najla.
Do you have a question?
Oh, wow, this is bad connection. Okay. So I sent information about I've been on since the very beginning of the call, and I wanted to ask Emory Recreation. Mm-hmm. We just implemented a 2-plot policy for the long-term gardeners, and we have a small waiting list. However, how are you going to get the 2 plot holders to downsize to a 1 plot? That's going to be a tremendous feat.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably going to be an individual circumstance. Right? For the gardens that are having those circumstances, I would say email us, and then we could definitely, if you need help with that, we could definitely be the ones to so,
Okay.
I mean, I would, please email us about it, and we'll come up with a plan.
That's full. And none of y'all.
Oh, so Maureen, I see your question here about the children's garden program on the weekends. So when parents are there with their kids, that's okay. The going back to the issue about kids and kids programming, it's when we talk about basically, I mean, the point of this is to protect kids from predators, right? So if the concern is if there's regular programming where a potential predator has an opportunity to develop a relationship and a relationship of trust with a child in a way that there's nobody else there witnessing it, protecting that kid, keeping an eye on what that relationship looks like and is turning into, that's really what we're talking about. If parents come to the garden with their kids, that's fine. That's the same thing as a parent coming to the playground with their kids, right? We don't require that all of our playgrounds are managed and observed constantly by DPR staff. We couldn't. There's just not enough money or manpower in the world to do that. So when parents are involved, that does not apply.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. All right.
And sorry, we're going through the questions now, folks, because I think we've scrolled past some of them unintentionally. We want to make sure we get everybody here.
Okay, going back. Okay, so we're. Is there flexibility in the dates you laid out in the documents, the plot assignments decisions we often make early in the year? Yeah, we're saying for the plots, we recognize the horrible timing of this, and for at least for the one plot household rule, we're allowing that to start next year. So you can, please let people know about this, but we're not going to actually, start splitting plots till the next year. If there is other things that you're worried about that with the timing of this, please email us or let us know, and we can we can work with you on this one. But as of right now, I think that's the main one with the timing issue.
Yeah, and I would say if this is more a question about how we define the season, there's flexibility there too. It sounds to me like you're talking about you have a longer season than what we require. So I think the dates that we laid out as far as when plots need to be active and when they need to be cleared out and that kind of thing is sort of the minimum. Like we don't want it to be shorter than that. We don't want people just gardening from May to the end of August, right? Like, we want to make sure the garden's active and being used for a minimal amount of time. So there's some flexibility there.
Well, for instance, I was curious, you had on the pulled out sort of I know the June date was listed a couple of times about having a communal plot, or for a low gardener plot, you had sort of a set things being reserved until a particular date time. If our season starts earlier, we need to get people in and going and plots cleaned out and being part of the community. Just that question of dates that seem to be laid out in either the group guidance or in the code or the rules.
I believe that's in the guidance where, if you don't have anyone on the waiting list by June, you could start giving 2 plots to people for that year, and then take the additional plots in the following year. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, because some of us, we're doing that plot and first cleanup activity in April, in March, and so, determining what that wait list is and going through it and making sure all the plots are assigned early so people are getting their jump and start and part of the community.
So when you submit your garden rules or your garden operating, feel free to write what dates work best for each garden. Because I believe that's just on the guidance. If anyone sees that, so there's a guidance, which is just like our suggestions. But in the actual agreement, we laid out rules that are not, that we have to do. And I don't believe that's in the actual rules.
Right, that's it. That was in the guidance, I think.
Yeah, that's just a suggestion. And because that's the way, we want, if you don't have anyone on the waiting list and you have empty plots, bad too. So let's just give up, by June or whatever date works best for you. Let's set a date, and then just make sure all your gardeners know about that date, and then you can start handing out additional plots at that point.
Right.
Although I think you did also have that about plot limit. You have a June 1st listed on the cooperative agreement template.
Sorry, y'all, forgive us. We've read these things so many times. It's all
It's
just
page 6 on the cooperative agreement.
Page 6. Okay. Plot limits. Okay.
So that might just be something where you might want to bracket for a garden to choose.
Yeah, we'll take a closer look at that, and we hear what you're saying, and I get it. We'll take a closer look at that.
I'm sure we could add some language that says with some flexibility on timing, depending on site situation.
I think you may have also scrolled past a question on the handicapped disabled plot. I forget the phrase I'm supposed to use. But is that something where, you guys can come out? We each have different topography and a layout. Is it going to be a situation where, okay, we now have to kick if we only have 1 or 2 spots that make sense? Or also if we already have a gardener or gardeners with disabilities, or lack of abilities, I'm just curious if you could opine on that further.
This is an agreement or the guidance?
Look, an access thing. That's a good question. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong. I'm reading the wrong question. So that's a good question, and I actually think that we're going to have to ask our lawyer about that. So this basically comes much like the other thing. This comes down to the law. So what do the ADA laws require of us? I do think there is some flexibility there. There is some. The ADA laws do recognize that not every scenario can be made accessible in the best possible way. So there is some flexibility there. It basically requires the government to offer equal services to people with different disabilities. And I think it's kind of vague, but I would like to double check with our general counsel about that before making any statement, solid statements.
Can you email us like a short summary just of your situation, and we'll get that double checked?
Sure. Well, I guess then the question would be on the equal treatment, or is it that person's going through the wait list process the same? I guess we'll email you guys further on the gardeners with disabilities.
It's complicated because, if there's been 40 people on the waiting list before somebody that needs an accessible plot signs up, right. I mean, I get it. We'll have to discuss that with our general counsel and get some more guidance on that.
All right. So we have someone said, can we add a no Miracle-Gro rule?
So Miracle-Gro is not considered organic, so that's actually already in there. In theory, Miracle-Gro is already not allowed.
Next one, my concerns with working with DPR is the slow response time. So definitely hear you on that. Was that is that relating to Stacy? Is that relating to a specific concern, or is that?
No, that's just the various places where you've said we need to get prior approval for doing something in the garden. And I think there's further down in the chat, Maureen, I think is at New Mexico. Anyway, she says, they were approved to have new garden beds and DPR ended up not ever doing it, so.
I think that's something we were supposed to build, though. I saw that, and I don't know anything about that.
My concern is just that nothing will ever be done if we have to get prior approval from DPR.
Yeah, I mean, usually like garden beds, it's not a big issue. I mean, like you say, we don't need like permits or anything like that for building a few garden beds. Like I said, I'm mainly just, email me, and I just need to double check the area that you're building and it's not being programmed or it's not, some kind of conflict. But yeah, if we do, I mean, if there's foundations and things like that, it does take a while to get approval. So, yeah, I don't know. Besides me, I mean, feel free to call me, email me. I will push this through as quickly as I can. But yeah, I definitely here with you. I mean, we are slow sometimes on things.
And if DGS has to get involved, that further complicates it. But
see, handicap disabled plot. Any further direction?
okay.
I think we already talked about that. The seasonal maintenance plan can make for a large amount of work. Yeah, I did. We are asking for a maintenance plan. That's don't like again. Don't doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just talk about like we require mainly like especially it's easy when there's a garden fenced in. We require everything maintenance wise inside the fence. On the gardener's responsibility. So if there's like some grass cutting you have to do inside the garden, weeding, things like that, we just make a list of the things and send that to us, and then the bigger anything outside the garden limit or outside the garden fence is DGS, and so that is up to us to get them to do that, and then the bigger things like the watering, if you have a water break or something like that. Again, like that's just a one-time thing. Just kind of outline the certain maintenance needs. I think it could be helpful when you have new managers, so they know right away what you're dealing with. But and then it's helpful for us. So when people ask us, whose responsibility it is, we can it helps to have some data behind that. But again, I mean,
it doesn't have to be the step-by-step layout of exactly how all the work's going to get done. It's more like, we agree to host a spring cleanup where gardeners will participate in cleaning and mulching the paths. Same thing for the fall, and that gardeners will agree to keep their plots and their plots and the paths adjacent to their plots clean throughout the duration of the season. So it doesn't have to be a super strenuous exercise. It's just sort of thinking through the season and thinking through what work needs to be done, at what time of year it needs to be done, and how basically y'all are going to go about doing it. And for most cases, we're just organizing community work days. So.
All right, I think we're done here. It's 1 o'clock. So I think what we should do is send out a notice to everybody who's concerned with the double plots, whether they're single.
I'm sorry, we can hear someone talking, but you're very faint. I think it's a woman, but I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh, it's okay. I was just talking to my husband about making plans. About making plans to have. Because we have quite a lot of people, married couples who have double plots. So I was talking about giving them all a heads up. And we've got some older gardeners, the ones who actually started the garden, and they were given extra plots because at the time there were extra plots available. And some of these people have really invested deeply. They do year-round gardening, and so it's going to be quite, hard for them to give up their other plot. But anyway, it's good that we have a year to get them used to that.
Yeah, and again, Josh and I are happy to help you all have these conversations with folks. It's just, again, we're just stuck in this position where we can't make exceptions for people, basically. It's just hard. We're just
no, I understand. But I did send you a note. You see, last year the city put in they took down the wall and put in a parking lot for this. Next to our unit is a police station. Next to our garden is a police station, and they put in a shelter for homeless moms and children. So the city actually did plan to put in some plots for us to make up the plots we lost along the wall, and we have an actual plan already drawn up here. And we ended up not agreeing to let them do it, but we had the plans, and now we're thinking we would like to do that. We'd like to have that made up. So I guess I could talk to you, Katie, about it, but it would, we have an area that would be perfect for making one big plot that perhaps we could use for the people in the homeless shelter to come and use.
Be awesome.
So do I need permission again for you to go ahead, or do?
Well, yeah, we'll follow up with you about that, because we've got to see exactly where you're talking about and all that kind of good stuff too. So we can,
the city they already had people come out and approve the area. You know, they had a whole bunch of landscapers and whatnot. So we already have the plans already. So.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
send us the email. Give it. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like. I mean, if you ever have approval, it sounds like we just need a heads up. But yeah, send us the email. We'll give you the heads up.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
It is 1 o'clock. What we can do, I'll go ahead. I'll cut and paste all these chat questions into a document, and we'll send it to the FAQ. But if anyone has any, I mean, I'm here for a little bit. If anyone has any like serious questions that they don't want to wait till the email, we can open it up. But if not, feel free to leave and follow up with us on any, send us any email follow-ups. We're happy. Yeah, we're happy to keep on talking now and in the future, and we're happy to work with you on any issues to get this going.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for taking the time to be with us today, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
If you're still there, Josh, can I ask a quick question? I think I had this, if the dog issue came up before we were, I was added to the Zoom group, so I couldn't chat and ask it. But I'm curious, certainly get it on the staying away from people's plots, but and this is Adrian from Virginia Avenue. We have a little bit different layout than say Newark or somewhere else, where we have a larger area that's fenced in. If someone came into our fenced-in area with their dog and had their dog, on the fence line under fruit trees in the shade versus having to lock it up or tie it up outside of our fenced area, just, trying to think of how to be respectful and healthful, because we don't want dogs going into people's actual plots, but to have a full, in our rules, no dogs can come into the garden at all rule. I'm just curious on that, if we could find a compromise of, all right, no dogs near the plots, but you can tie it up in the shade over here.
I mean, that's one option. Because it's the DOH rule, we would have to talk to our legal counsel. But if you had like a designated area, like under some trees, you can make a case that maybe you want to provide some shade. If you want to send us that, email us with that. We can ask about that. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just this weird thing where it's hard for us to make exceptions on stuff, right? So, because then somebody else will interpret it and say, well, they let dogs in their garden, and we have this shady corner that's 2 feet by 2 feet. Why can't we have our dogs there? So I understand it's hard for us to like outright say we're going to make an exception for you, but I think at the end of the day, we're always willing to talk things through and take a look at the space and see if there's a reasonable solution.
So yeah, definitely follow up with us on the email, and we'll get back to you on that.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions?
I had one more that had struck me. I know on the cooperative agreement template, it spoke about maintenance areas and the community partner group being responsible for both sides of the fence, all areas in the garden and pathways. Again, just as you feel both of you had used the word, talking about equity. I guess I'm just curious on that. Typically we've not, the city has mowed around our fence on the outside and been we do our best to keep the weeds down when we don't have, CSX installing 10-foot fences, so we can't access the other side of our fence. Right. But I guess I'm just curious, sort of again, in that leniency or better description on there, that we're responsible for both sides. It seems like, all right, we now are mowing on the outside of our full fence line too.
I believe.
Sorry, this is Stacy. I just want to add, Adrian, we're in the same boat because we share a fence with the Army Corps of Engineers reservoir that is right next to us, and they are not always the most attentive to mowing along the fence line. So we have all kinds of invasive things growing on their side that we can't get to.
Yeah. So I believe with that, when we said both sides of the fence, it's mainly just when things are growing on the fence. We don't expect people. It's not in your. You do not have to mow around the fence. And if that is not being mowed by DGS, definitely let us know, and we can follow up with DGS about that. Mainly is like you're responsible for everything inside the fence, and then whatever's like growing on the fence.
Yeah, and
we ask for.
We can clarify that language. I get your point. I think it is just instances where, like, vines and stuff grow up on the fence. It might be literally growing exactly on the fence line, that kind of thing. So I mean, when we say outside the fence, I think we mean, like, in my mind, I'm thinking like the 4 inches on either side of the fence, But we can clarify that language, because I get what you're saying there.
And that's one reason why we want to do like just a simple maintenance plan, just to kind of, if there is issues, like, our Army Corps of Engineers is one side, if you're sharing a fence with them or whatever, we can just outline that real quick on the maintenance plan.
All right.
All right, any other questions? All right, well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate all that you do to keep these gardens running, and we want to work with you, and we want to make sure that everyone's feels good about where we're at with all of this. So definitely keep on keep in contact, and we'll work with you all spring to get this going. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening, a great day. The rest of the evening.